Thank you for this opportunity to speak at this very meaningful conference. We see many colors and shades of approaches in this conference, and it's very important to exchange our views. I will mainly share my experience from rapporteurship, these 6 years when I had a global mandate, but also regional, sub-regional insights about the region which can be called Central Eastern Europe. So the easier part is about agreements which now exist within global mental health, and we should use this, that finally mental health is out of shadows, finally importance of mental health is recognized. Maybe it could happen much earlier, but good that it finally happened. And that states are urged to invest more in mental health and mental health care. And their agreements are over. All the rest, how to invest and how not to invest, is area of big tensions, but I think meaningful tensions. And very slowly, maybe too slowly, the world is moving towards human rights-based approach in mental health care. Partly because everybody starts to understand an acceptable situation with violations of human rights of persons who need and who use mental health services, and that this is not just because of lack of resources. This is to a large extent because of attitudes. So anyway, it's a good time for all stakeholders to rethink their position on important issues and their role. And the conference, as we know, the title is about rethinking. And after rethinking, of course, to go to actions. Just briefly about the view from the UN, where I had the mandate, one of mechanisms being part of special procedures. Then when you are appointed as a special rapporteur, and this is a global mandate, and my mandate was right to physical and mental health. So UN, and especially Geneva, not so much New York, could be also New York, because Geneva, as you know, it's human rights part of UN mainly, and New York is where power is based, the Security Council, which sometimes is doing not well. But in Geneva, in UN Geneva, there is a very powerful understanding that mental health and human rights is a serious issue, and three powerful resolutions from Human Rights Council during last 6 years with very tough recommendations. Sadly, governments often tend to ignore when recommendations are good and strong. CRPD committee, as we know, is with our national Jonas Ruškus, was very good in sending messages, and also many special rapporteurs, not just my mandate, but also disabilities, torture. And if you are interested in all these documents, there is a link there. Recently, WHO joined this movement. Initially, WHO was cautious because WHO is composed of governments, so it should be consensus. Last year, I will come back to this document, WHO issued a very strong document, which I very strongly recommend to everyone, especially to policymakers. And actually, WHO joined this movement, urging to abandon legacy of outdated practices in mental health. And I will come back to this document, but all these documents urge UN member states to move away from legacy of discrimination, social exclusion, stigmatization, institutionalization, coercion, over medicalization. This is from 200 years ago, and I will speak about this in the end when there was debate between Philippe Pinel and government officials about why this madman behaves so nasty. And we are very often in this debate after 200 years. Is it because of their mental disorder, or is it because we deprived them of liberty? You know of many dramatic paradigm shifts in the history of mental health care, and I will not stop on them. The sad thing is that usually human beings do not learn from painful lessons and tend to repeat them. It's a pity, of course. So there were good things, of course. Each shift of paradigm was moving to better situation for people with mental health condition and with better understanding of human rights. So this means that we should not be afraid of paradigm shifts. We should support them when time comes. And of course, there were very painful things happening during last 100 years, and they were, just to remind us, that they were done with the recommendations of scientists, of researchers, like lobotomy, like euthanasia program in Nazi Germany by famous professors of genetics and psychiatry. But some countries learn from this, like Germany, which I was happy to meet leaders of German psychiatry and to discuss very seriously human rights issues. And some winners of the war, as we know, still do not use a human rights-based approach and oppose it. Effects of Cold War are very interesting because both sides, Soviet camp and what we called free world, we were behind Iron Curtain, but they both used the human rights-based approach in selective way, either ignoring economic social rights, like American style, let's say, or ignoring civil political rights, like Soviets. And both these models led to ineffective mental health systems. So it's one of example how important is to not to manipulate with the human rights-based approach and fully embrace it. And now we speak a lot about what to do with coercion, and 40 years of dominance of biomedical model, when biomedical model was celebrating victory, especially in the debate in the West against psychoanalytic model. And now it is the clouds are gathering over, I should not say biomedical model, over overuse and too heavy reliance on biomedical model, which contributes also to coercion. So I would like to remind also us that we should not forget that all what we are doing, mental health services, do not happen in vacuum. The societal issues and human rights-based approach is crucial to mental health of everyone. So all forms of violence, discrimination, inequalities, injustice have negative impact on mental health. And this is why states need to invest in supporting, enabling non-discriminatory, non-violent environments in all settings. Family, school, workplace, community, healthcare, social services, society at large. And ironically, what about mental health services? So they also should be free from violence, discrimination, injustice, and this is a task for mental health services. Important role of civil society. Those countries are doing better which engage civil society in non-discriminatory way, and civil society organizations serve not only for advocacy but as very good service provision. And Then two things which happened recently, pandemic and war of Russia against Ukraine. Of course, these were sad things, but sometimes sad things have sobering effect. So global community maybe will revitalize, I hope so, universal human rights principles, multilateralism, because we see what is happening when some strong men first kill civil society in their own countries and then they move to save from universal human rights principles other nations. So, and this has to do also with mental health a lot. Challenges within status quo in global mental health. I do not hide, and my position when I was special rapporteur was to very seriously critically address status quo, because there are many signs that it is failing, this model which was dominant for 40 years, and there are many signs like the dramatic increase of prescribing psychotropic medication when they are needed, but also when they are not needed. No progress in search of biomarkers, so crisis of biological psychiatry, and maybe very good opportunities for social psychiatry. Pathologization of diversity, medicalization of feelings, and coercion is on the rise globally, in global south, in global north, in all advanced countries like UK. With all these investments, each year we have more cases of involuntary measures. So things are going wrong, and we have just to recognize this. And mental health systems and channels of funding are based on too much, I should say, on so-called conventional wisdoms, which are based on myths and prejudices, that these people are dangerous. So this is how coercion is justified, and that there is medical necessity to apply involuntary measures in order to treat them by force, and we know that medications are not that miraculous as they were presented by some interest groups. So scenarios for global south and global north are very interesting, because some experts will tell that global north has better opportunity for breakthrough, for reforms, and others will tell no, global south has, because no such big resistance, no sophisticated services based on traditional biological psychiatry. But I think both global south and north have good opportunities if there is political will and support from stakeholders. Now about our region, because we meet in Vilnius, and there are many colleagues from Ukraine. So all regions are special. I learned this when I had a global mandate. But the region of Central Eastern Europe, I think, still suffers from too heavy legacy of this experiment, which used to be Soviet psychiatry. So some countries suffered it 50 years, others 70 years, and some continue this experiment. I mean, Russian Federation. So, and here I see the role of international organizations who should address human rights violations more seriously. For example, there is in fashion now the protection of traditional family values concept, which is popular also in this country, and it is detrimental to mental health of children, of women. So international organizations should raise this issue. Also, International Psychiatric Association, I should thank European Psychiatric Association for very clear statement about Russia and Russian Psychiatric Association, but we still wait from World Psychiatric Association, because so far there is silence about what is happening in Russian society, but also in Russian psychiatry, because we know that for the last 20 years, Russian psychiatry was fully under control, something similar like Russian church. And it should not be so, because psychiatric professional groups should not ignore their moral duty to adhere to ethical standards of the profession. Maybe my provocative insight would be that we neighbors who now understand this threat from Kremlin, but we still have a lot of legacy from Soviet totalitarian psychiatry, and we should reflect this. And all this paternalism, more than in, let's say, Western countries, ignoring ethical committees or ethical standards by professional associations, all these hierarchies that psychiatrists know more and better than other professionals or users, excessive use of coercion, disempowerment of users, and that the principle, the holy principle, I should say, first do no harm, is ignored, because in universities, medical doctors receive other message, that the more aggressive you are, the better doctor you are. And in psychiatry, it's a very dangerous message. So human rights-based approach are not taken seriously, if not to say more. And it's not just about me, but the question which I receive in this region more often, that sort of what happened to you? You could be a good doctor, but you became interested in human rights, which has nothing to do with medicine. So this is, for me, it's just some signal that we still do not really understand the importance of human rights based approach. And here I see legacy of this Soviet experiment. Well, I contributed to global discourse with this global burden, instead of global burden of diseases, which I think is too medicalized approach and escalates even more medicalization, which is too much already. In provocative way, I raised other obstacles, which are overuse of biomedical interventions, power asymmetries, which disempower users and non-medical mental health professionals, and biased use of knowledge and evidence, because, as you know, students still are taught all this chemical imbalances theory, that all this depression and everything is just in the brain, which was the message in 19th century and now last 40 years. And one of my statements was that depression is more about power imbalances, or let's say social determinants of mental health, more rather than chemical imbalances. And these two views, maybe I put it too bluntly, but traditional psychiatrists, now there's diversity also among psychiatrists, happily, but traditional psychiatrists, they will create hierarchy of human rights, and they will tell that the highest right is to have a good psychiatrist who will fix your disorder, voluntarily or by force. And this is duty of psychiatry. And then after fixing disorder, people can enjoy other rights, and this is how psychiatrists, in this case, understand dignity, because without fixing disorder, there is no dignity. So first allow us to fix disorder because we are experts, and then other human rights may come. And on the other side are human rights activists, users, and many other groups who tell no, let's end all this legacy of coercion in psychiatry. So it's a very meaningful debate. It's painful. It's going on maybe without any movement. It's so-called impasse situation. And frankly, when I formulated the position of my mandate, both groups were unhappy. So, and then independent expert is very happy when you do not please anyone. So psychiatrists were not happy for obvious reasons. Human rights experts were not happy because I did not follow CRPD committee position, just to urge to ban all non-consensual measures now. I recommended this as a process, measurable process, which means that I sort of allow psychiatry to continue with coercion. So this is just to reflect the difficult different understanding of such words like dignity. And now we know all these rights-based services. I will not stop on them. They were presented in this conference. But the main idea is that there are the importance of lived experiences of users of services, alternatives to coercive approaches, and excessive medicalization, excessive hospitalization, of course, institutionalization. And I expect that leadership of global psychiatry should more clearly send the message and to support these alternatives, because they are so far kept on the margins. This good document by WHO, and here you see the list of good practices, and our region has one representative. It's Georgia, it's Sakartvelo is here. Could be more, but I think that in our region something happened with vision, improvisation, innovations, so that the only way to establish new practices establishes it in psychiatric hospital, which is better than nothing. But why we cannot have new practice in new place? And for some reasons, managerially, it is hardly possible. So these all services should become mainstream, and this is the main idea of changes. So these are all urgent need for shift of paradigm is both about changes within mental health services and beyond mental health services. It could be good that our countries are not so reluctant to universal human rights principles, because we know that even also in our region, there are many forces which will oppose universal human rights principles, which will be homophobic, transphobic, xenophobic, and so on. This is all about mental health. We cannot promote good mental health with all these phobias, even when they are institutionalized by government, like it happened with migrants last year, not with Ukrainians, but with other migrants. So, and all these changes are needed, I think, not first of all for users of services, but also for improving image and reputation of psychiatry. So these changes, and experts who promote these changes, they are not against psychiatry or against psychiatrists. And they are not anti-psychiatrists, but they, at least in our region, they are immediately labeled by dominant forces that if you move at least a little bit away from dominance of biomedical model, the society and the government will be informed that these are anti-psychiatrists coming. So my request to leaders of international psychiatry is to educate national professional groups and to explain. I think anti-psychiatry is when psychiatry is used in brutal ways. This should be renamed as anti-psychiatry. And this message from WHO, I think it's very important that just what is in bold. It is critical that mental health system and services widen their focus beyond the biomedical model to also include a more holistic approach that considers all aspects of a person's life. Current practice in all parts of the world, however, places psychotropic drugs at the center of treatment responses, whereas psychosocial intervention, psychological intervention, and peer support should also be explored. So yes, we should abandon this legacy that those are better experts who very easily medicate patients. This may be very harmful, this tradition. And so final observations is just I will save time because I already mentioned all these main things, main messages where maybe we still do not agree, we still disagree, but at least we agree that we disagree, which is not bad. But my request is especially to leaders of psychiatry in liberal democracies, what message they send to other countries on human rights and mental health care. Because if the message is yes and no, then many opponents of changes will be very happy to stay with the status quo. And well, back to Pinel. When they went to dungeons to see how this madman, because Pinel, as you know, recommended to unchain them, so they will not scream so much. And they went to dungeons, and these madmen were behaving very nasty way. They were kicking and spitting and all this. And government official tells to Pinel, now citizen, are you mad yourself to seek to unchain such beasts? To which Pinel replied, citizen, I am convinced that these madmen are so intractable only because they have been deprived of air and liberty. So air maybe is now easy issue, but, oh, no, with climate change is not. But liberty, yes, we still deprive people of liberty, sadly. And the next quote is from Jonathan Mann, who was famous doctor and advocate for human rights and for effective approach to HIV/AIDS, because human rights-based approach was applied. So, as you see, he told the human rights framework provides a more useful approach for analyzing and responding to modern public health challenges than any framework thus far available with the biomedical tradition. I think that our region can become leader and champion in applying finally human rights-based approach in the field of mental health. Thank you.